So next up in our Fast Saga is Fast and Furious 6. Now first we should probably talk about the fact that it goes Fast and Furious, Fast 5, and Fast and Furious 6, with the next one being Furious 7. It's at this point where the movie's nameage just gets pretty stupid. Shortly after the success of Fast 5, the producers ultimately decided that they wanted to go in this direction with it. Instead of it being about fast cars and street races, it will be more about heist and action and sort of spy stuff. This movie is much more of that sort of thing, with it being more about crazy action stuff, to the point of it almost being maybe a little bit too much of that. Now, while at first the idea was supposed to be Fast 6 and Fast 7 were going to be together and filmed both at the same time, which besides one movie I can only really think of that ever being a good idea, I'm very glad they didn't do that. Like what they're doing right now with the 10th and 11th movies being a two-parter. But even despite this not being exactly a two-parter and not being filmed at the same time, the story does directly continue into Furious 7, so there you go. But regardless, this is the very last one canonically before Tokyo Drift, so this one explains a little bit more of why Han is the way he is in there, but also directly continues off of Fast 5 in what I feel to be probably the best way they could have. Now this one simply is just, of course, Hobbs, who's been tracking our crew and their several whereabouts, which, considering how very lavishly they're living their lives, considering that, like, Roman has his own plane that says, "It's Roman, bitches," which, great job hiding out. But he ultimately kind of just let them be, as in reality he was tracking this newer crew, which was becoming a little bit more prominent. Seemingly they've been around quite longer than you would think, but they've only recently now come under the watch of Hobbs. This, of course, being Owen Shaw's crew, which, as we saw in the stinger of the previous one, is now working with Liddy Ortiz, who is alive in somehow that happened. So Hobbs goes to Dom, who is still with Elena during this point, and she just convinces Dom to just go for Letty because that's just the right thing to do. Dom at first thinks he's gonna totally do on his own, but Hobbs is just like, no, you're not, stupid. Which, yeah, no shit. Not that Dom won't totally shove his whole ego in the whole entire movie and basically take over the crew, almost basically doing it all by himself anyway, but whatever. Point is, we get everyone except for Tego and Rico, which I said Leo last time. It's Tego Leo. That's his name. I called Rico Leo. That's not correct. But they're not in this movie. They're probably going off somewhere else. I'd like to imagine Dom just didn't want to get them involved, only to, like, keep them safe, because he knew how dangerous this was going to be, and he wanted to be precise and not, get Letty killed. So with help of Hobbs' technology, they're actually able to track down Owen Shaw, and they very quickly get in this big chase scene where they actually do use a sort of version of those electric harpoons I mentioned before. They have these weird little chips that they just kind of, like, shoot on top of their cars, which, electrify and then stop their cars, which, hey, I guess that's kind of answers my question, but not really, because why aren't the police and thus Hobbs using their version of the things? Again, they worked pretty well, so. But because of that and these weird things, these, like, flip cars, which just drive into people and it flips cars all over the place, Owen's crew is able to get out of there, and our main crew do have to go back to trying to find them. As they get closer and closer, Dom several times tries to make contact with Letty, and does during a cool street race that they do, which, just by the nature of street racing, they're able to kind of reconnect, and they essentially touch each other's scars or something weird. And Han and Giselle, alongside Roman, in a very funny scene, happen to kind of check out this one tech guy's place. And even though he's shot by Shaw's men, he does reveal that Braga from Fast and Furious is, in fact, involved with Owen's dealings. Brian Chirrup just sends himself into the jail where Braga is and nearly gets shanked to death in order to find out that there's probably someone who's telling Shaw what they're doing, and that's the reason they're not able to find him. This, of course, is obviously the new character, the character made for and introduced in the movie, which It's not that much of a shock. Despite this, they're actually able to sort of figure out that he's trying to trick them in order to get this caravan moved away so they can quickly ambush it. So our crew tries to stop the ambush in a really cool scene of them on the highway, where even though they thought they stopped the whole truck, they should have just have a tank in the truck, which is very funny and really brings out Ludacris's best acting moment where it actually seemed genuine for once. But even though they're nearly crushed and what is at the very least 5 people get killed by Owen just driving his fucking tank on the highway, they're actually able to stop the tank, whole ass like putting a broken car as its anchor, almost flipping it over, and they're able to save Letty from almost getting slingshot off of it. With this, they capture Owen, and thus, of course, he reveals that he has some people hiding away. Just in case they caught him, he could just threaten them with Mia. And yes, of course, when he does this, he reveals that, hey, that character, she's working with them. Oh, surprise. It's weird when you look at the like dumb bad PS2 game before this, that takes place directly before this, where she was talking with Ava Mendes and she was figuring stuff about them, and it's not that it's impossible that she would be doing all the research, and that's probably in fact how they got all the files on the guys, but it's also weird because she seemed genuinely sad that her partner, who was introduced in that game, had died. But then again, that's that game, and has nothing to do with this movie. But still, this is like the last time I'm going to reference that game, by the way. You know, it's just I just kind of like the idea that maybe there was a couple other fun things that happened in the year in between, and all it really was Letty did a couple other jobs with Shaw, where they flipped a couple other randos off, and then one time Han and Tego had a race at some point, because why not? But regardless, the very last scene that everyone always talks about is that Shaw and his men try to escape on a plane, and it takes them way too long considering how big a airway probably would be. But they are able to somehow crash the plane and still have room to not themselves crash right into the gate that would probably be at the end of the runway. It's a crazy, awesome action scene that just doesn't make any sense for a good chunk of it. Lots of people get crashed or thrown out of the plane or thrown into the fucking turbine. And anyone who doesn't is on the plane when it just kind of bursts into flames and crashes. Unfortunately, one of these people does happen to be Giselle, who sacrifices herself in order to save Han from some guy who weirdly looks like very, very potato-ish. With that, all the group is able to get full pardons, and in fact, they're able to get their original house, which is shot at the original house from The Fast and the Furious, and it's really cool seeing them back there. Now they fully own it, and they're able to just kind of have a fun little time as friends and family. With Han, of course, going off to Tokyo for something he just has to do. But strangely, due to that finality, it ends in the exact same way that 5 did. The characters are still living their lives very happily. They have this happily ever after. Brian now has his kid who's, out there now. And now even Dom has Letty back. And even though there is a bittersweet nature to it, due to the fact that he has to say bye to Elena, who ultimately just kind of accepts that she has to get out of there, family is reconnected, and they still have this cool, happy ending. It's, again, a movie that this didn't need to happen. We had the conclusion, but if this was the only one after this, it also would have been fine. Everyone has their happy ending, and that's kind of all you could really ask, honestly. And if this was the last of the Fast and Furious movies, I think I'd be fine with it, especially with it now being directly before Tokyo Drift, so there's the ending for Han. But, obviously, they were planning on making a sequel immediately after, so the exact next scene before the credits roll is the other Shaw, revealing that he is behind the thing during what happened in Tokyo Drift. But we'll get to the things that happened post this a little bit later. What about this movie? Well, everything I said about the previous one could basically be said about this one. Justin Lin is a really great director. He really knows how to set up his shots in order to get the best view of this crazy action. The person I'd like to think that the last one might have better directing due to the fact that there was a little bit too much shaky cam. I'm really not that much of a fan of when movies seem to move the camera around all of the time during the fight scenes. The fight against Dom and Hobbs in the previous one was a very well-made fight scene, because while it was definitely very intense and did have a bit of shake, it wasn't as much as the ones in this one. Like, they were really, really shaky. Though I don't feel that exactly takes away from them, as I do think they're very intense, and due to just the crazy shit that these people end up doing to each other, and like, there's a whole part where Dom picks up a big dude, and then Hobbs just, like, fucking clothesline him. It's awesome, and I'm not going to question any of that. Especially due to all the crazy car stunts they do in this. Both a mix of very crazily set up practical effects and crazy cool CGI. And the fact that there was, like, 6 whole editors in this, of course it was going to end up being a very good looking movie that mixes all of that stuff together for some high impact intense action scenes. These are very well done and very, very entertaining, and the whole last plane scene, though scientifically entirely inaccurate, is just very tense and very cool. And that just comes from the fact that you just like these characters a lot. You know, even they're not the greatest characters of all time, I wouldn't put them in the, like, best dramas or anything like that. You know, but you're not here to watch The Lighthouse. You're here to watch Fast and Furious. They're here to fuck shit up and drive stuff into things, and they do that incredibly well, and they're likable, fun, enjoyable characters during such. These characters coming back together and having a fun time, you really feel that they did grow as a team and as people together from the last one, and they're just as close-knit friend group as previous. It's really cool seeing them together. And if there was any reason to bring these characters back after their good ending, it was, you know, the fact that Letty's back. Certain sequels don't need to be made, and most don't. But when you give me a good enough premise, I could totally accept it. The fact that a character that was once thought dead turns out to not be, and you have to go out of your way to explain how, that's enough whole movie to be written there. To have the characters go get them, no matter where they are, and have her be part of the villain group was a very interesting idea. This was the right way to bring back these characters. So, I don't really have any complaints about the direction the characters go. My only real complaint is the fact that, yeah, Dom is very just in there, isn't he? He always has had these sort of things, like how he just... Like, his idea of the whole "this is Brazil" thing was very much this show-offy nature that he just does in these movies, where he just kind of takes control of the situation. He just goes out on his own and does whatever he wants, and it just happens to work out. And I could excuse that in Fast and Furious and in Fast 5, but it just feels egregious in this movie. It feels like Hobbs gives him way too much in this, and when he just goes out to just meet Letty on his own, the fact that Hobbs happens to put a tracker on him was incredibly lucky, because he could have just been dead. He could have just died right there. And then what? What would have been the point there? It really feels that Dom steps his boundaries way too far in this, away from the plan, and it could have fucked multiple things up. And nobody questions that. And of course, there's the whole logical fallacies of the multiple crashes and explosions that people just happen to survive. The only one I can really excuse is the fact that Letty was far away from the car that exploded beforehand from Fast and Furious, that she didn't both get killed by it or get any burns from it. The fact that neither of those happened, fine, but like multiple crashes in this movie and the several just clearly death-defying things are just kind of too much at times. Like when they flip over the tank and Letty goes flying, the fact that Dom was able to just send himself forward enough that it somehow gets to her in the right amount of time and they crash on a car is the stupidest fucking thing, because it just doesn't make any sense. Because there was no way that should have ever fucking happened. And I personally wouldn't have had it happened at all. As a director, I know I would have definitely not only taken away a couple of these scenes that these characters clearly would have fucking died from, or at least changed them so they, will be more possible, but I also feel like you probably could have done a little bit better in terms of the actual characters acting. I've seen better from Vin Diesel in the previous movies. Vin Diesel is a normally gruff guy who doesn't show too much emotion, and you won't get a lot of range from him, but I've seen better from this guy in multiple movies. I've seen better from this guy from the fucking Pacifier, for God's sakes. What happened here? And yeah, I mentioned ludicrous. The only real emotion he ever gives is when that tank shows up. The rest of it is just like, oh, I've hacked into the database. Bingo, I've got it. It's just like, show some fucking emotion. It felt like Justin Lin, while he knew how to set up the shots for the action scenes to make them entertaining, he both went way too far with it and made it ultimately just like too actiony, and then B, didn't like let any of the people act. Like, it seemed like he may have been too scared to tell the big actor to fucking act. I feel like that's a bunch of directors do that. They just don't have the ability to be like, hey, do this. Like, do it. This is what is needed for this scene, please. You know, like, I feel, I could be totally wrong, but it felt like Justin Lin didn't want to, didn't know, or was too scared to do so, of telling people what to do for the right emotion of the scene, you know? And yeah, again, it's Fast and Furious, and I don't want this movie to be like the smartest thing of all time, you know? I'm not looking for the lighthouse, like I said, but I still want some more emotion from these characters. I feel like the best person in this is Han in this, who generally feels like he cared about what happened to Giselle. And Gal Gadot's also really good in this. The two of them have a natural chemistry that you really do feel for what happens in this. That being said, Vin Diesel and Michelle Rodriguez do also have a good chemistry, and when they are together, that is the best scenes for those two characters. I feel like this movie's acting, directing, with its crazy shaky cam, and even its soundtrack just aren't as good as Fast 5 specifically. I don't know if it was because of the producers, or if it was because of Justin Lin wanting to do more than he was really capable of doing, but it felt like there was a little bit more hands on this movie than there really should have been regardless. There was a little bit of differing ideas of where to bring this series, and that kind of makes this movie a little bit messier than it should have been coming out to be. But despite that, I still found this a very enjoyable movie. I mean, it's Fast and the Furious. You like these characters, you like what's going on, it's a cool, crazy action, and even though it's so illogical that it would make Spock fucking die, still fun. Still fun, and that's all you could really ask. I still love Fast and Furious 6, you know, I'll question the shit out of it, but I'm still gonna enjoy it while I'm watching it, you know? Nothing is necessarily angering or badly done. It's not perfectly done, it's not a smart movie, but is it a bad movie? No, of course not. If your action movie both has good action and enjoyable enough characters, that's a good action movie. You could do better, you could do more than that, but that on a base level is what you need. So the question is, what happens after this? Well, two things. If you're coming from chronological order, it will be the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. That'll be what we're talking about next, because it's what happens canonically. But if you're happening release order, then it of course will be the one made soon after this to tie everything up together and kind of be what should have been the ending. That be of course being Furious 7. Depending on which you're going to, you'll be seeing one of those next time, and most importantly, you'll be seeing the clearness on how things changed in this series. Fast 5 was the transitional movie, and this going forward will be everything is bigger, action-packed, and crazier as time goes on. But until then, hey, if you enjoyed the previous Fast and Furious 6 is the right movie to continue going forward. It's a good time, even though you'll be scratching your head that whole fun time. So until then, when we get to one of those two movies, I've been the Movie-a-thoner. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, go ahead and watch those future ones and subscribe for anything else in the future. Did you like Fast and Furious 6, or did you think it's much worse of a movie than I mentioned? Well, leave that stuff in the comments. Most importantly, stay good, stay safe, don't be an asshole.